It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Kicking off the show with one of our favorite guests here in a moment, Jonathan Tavernari, JT, of course, former BYU Hooper, joins the program on a weekly basis, talks some college hoops. And last night, of course, JJ was the big one. Everybody waiting on that number one Arizona team coming into Provo. It happened, and it was a very similar game to what we saw kind of at the beginning of the season with BYU, who like to get behind against teams.
It's a problem.
Did it against UConn. They came back and won a lot of games. You notice that finishing off the best of the best is a very tough thing to do if that's your game plan. Not really their game plan. I'm sure they wanted to play a lot better. I'm sure they wanted to shoot a lot better with their big three. I'm sure Richie Saunders did not want to be in foul trouble and then end up fouling out at the end of the game, and you're sitting on the bench when your team's down one with 11 seconds to go. While the dramatics were awesome, I said this at the very top of it, I didn't like that you were down most of this game. I didn't like that you were down double digits. So you can complain about whether or not the Rob Wright, the third, having the ball at the end of the game was the right call or not, or if even that was the call. But I think the bigger problem is slow starts and trying to overcome those types of big leads against the number one team in the country. What I got from that is BYU has the ability to go deep, deep, deep in the NCAA tournament. But things have to go well with those top three. And it's a bummer that it ended like that. However, it was an exciting game. You took the number one team down to the wire. Now, you remember last year when they were in Tucson, and that one went, I don't know if it went to overtime, but a similar game.
No, it was the Richie foul at the end.
That's right. It was like 91-90 or 93-92.
Thought they got robbed.
Right. And so
I think there was a lot of feeling like, it was our turn.
There was some payback, but like I said, I don't want to get so far into whether or not the X's and O's that were drawn up by KY at the end of the game were good enough, or if Rob Wright should have been shooting that last shot. It was about the way you get started in these games, and they were down by 19 at one point in the second half, and I went, this is not the way to do it. Join us on the program right now, Jonathan Tavernari. JT, did you catch that game last night by chance?
I was there. As you guys know, I do pre, post, and halftime shows for BYU TV and ESPN, and
you're phenomenal, by the way.
It's really good.
I appreciate that. That's why Alex reached out to me, JJ, and said, I just can't take Jeremiah no more. I'm looking for a substitute. Let's try JT for a little bit. So, all jokes aside, it was a fantastic game. It had like a Sweet 16 vibe to it, right? And the reason why I say Sweet 16 and not Elite 8 or Final Four is just because, BYU has some work to do. And, for about 35 minutes, Arizona looked flawless. And I don't exaggerate. They looked flawless. And then, at the end of the game, BYU, mounted a comeback. And I agree with you guys. You don't win and lose a game on the last shot. There were so many things BYU could have done, in the first half for pretty much most of the second half, and they didn't. And so to just get hung up on the fact that the ball went to Rob Wright, who had a wide-open look for a layup, but then someone made an incredible defensive play. But it was a phenomenal basketball game last night in Provo.
What do you attribute to the first half issues that BYU's having this year? You take away the first half, and this team is elite, but the first half has been an issue, even in some games where they should have cruised. I remember the Delaware game. Was it Delaware? I mean, they've had games this year where – they don't play like they're capable of playing in the first half. Then they show up in the second half. A couple times this year it's been too late, and last night was one of those nights. What are you seeing in the first half?
To your point, that has happened multiple times. Albaline Christian, Delaware, in some games that you're like, geez, the lights are on, the popcorn, the corn is popping, we got to go.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that I just don't understand. It's become a running joke where I say, can Kevin Young make the adjustments, instead of halftime? Can he make them before the game? Can we, whatever pep talk is happening, between the first and the second half, can that happen before the game? And, I don't know if maybe the players need to get a feel for it. They just need to get going. I will say this, BYU is counting heavily on Rob Wright III, AJ DeBonsa, and Richie Saunders. It is borderline too much. And, yesterday we saw a little bit of, flashes of Mihailo Boskovic, getting some shots up and actually forcing a little bit of shots, which I'm totally fine with. We saw Alexei Kostic, that actually came in and knocked down a couple of threes and kind of ignited that little run they had in the last 7-8 minutes. And so, maybe is it something that, because these guys have such a big load to carry, they are just kind of like waiting to get going and get their bodies going, right? But I will say that if I had the answer for that, I would probably be part of, Kevin Young's staff instead of being talking over here with you guys today.
Hey, don't dog that. That's a good second choice, all right? Talking with us, it's a good second chance.
It could be worse, guys. It could be definitely worse, I'll tell you that. But I appreciate you guys having me on.
So when you watch this thing go down and we were talking about Richie being on the bench with, fouling out and anytime that the big three don't do it, that those are these games and they were in it. I mean, obviously you're down 1 with 11 seconds. It was a very different tune from 3 minutes left when they were down 11 or 9 or whatever it was. And yeah, the big comebacks have been happening. I think that you see also that the big comebacks against really, really good teams fall short. They did it against UConn, and people are pointing that out. And I feel bad for Rob Wright because they're like, yeah, and he fumbled the ball at the end of the UConn game too. And I'm like, I think we're missing the point here. You can get away with it against teams like Delaware, even Clemson, right, where they end up having that last second, this miracle shot that was awesome. Except like against the number 1 team in the country and against the number 3 team in the country who have multiple national championships recently, it's just harder to do it, and it's not something you can count on.
Well, listen, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second because you're totally correct on what you're saying. It's a true statement. It's fine. Nevertheless, I'm going to play the other side of the coin here, which is if this team has aspirations of going to the Final Four, who are they going to face down the road? Are they going to face Delaware and, Boo Boo State University College? Or are they going to face, UConn and Arizona and Texas Tech, right? Who are they going to face? And, to your point, the Clemson game was it was my first time at Madison Square Garden. It was an incredible atmosphere to be. It was amazing. Nonetheless, to have to crawl back in these games, the amount of energy, I mean, both of you know this, the amount of energy, it doesn't matter the sport that we're talking about, the amount of energy it takes from, to be able to go from down 20 to a 1-possession game, it's incredible. And so, and maybe that's just the MO for this team. Just is the MO for this team that, Richie, Rob, and AJ have to score 70% of their points. And so, but again, right, BYU doesn't really have a marquee win this year, if you really stop to think about it, which it's a knock on them, right? It is something, it's an issue that they're facing right now. They played, I think it was Wisconsin when Wisconsin was number 25 in the country, blew them out, right? Wisconsin did have a really good win against Michigan, but hasn't done much since. Clemson remains pretty much their best win of the season. But when you look at all of that, they couldn't get the job done against number 15 Texas Tech on the road, couldn't get the job done against number 3 UConn on a neutral site, and couldn't get the job done at home against number 1 Arizona. Now I'm going to be, put on my blue goggles. Well, geez, JT, look at the 3 games you just talked about. They have, 3 losses on the season, and they're all to top 15 teams in the country. You're right. But again, this is not 2007, JJ, that you covered us, where our goal was to just make to the NCAA tournament. This is a roster of over $15 million in NIL. This is a roster made up for you to get to the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, the Final Four. And so expectations have to be counted on. And so at that point, BYU doesn't have really something that they can hang their head on yet, and which is what makes the Saturday matchup in Kansas beyond important, and personally, I'll say this. and I don't know if anybody in the program that I'm connected to would say this, right? Or at least they wouldn't say it out loud, with massive consequences in terms of who's going to be picked ahead. Is it AJ or Darren? Is BYU worthy of a top 4, NCAA, seeding? There is a lot at stake on Saturday, more than just a win on the road on the Big 12.
You look at the stats, and A.J. DeBonsa, 6 of 24. Rob Wright, 3 of 16. They combined to go 9 of 40. Do you think that there's a little bit of – you mentioned the toll that those big three have had to carry, and Richie obviously got in foul trouble. Are they getting exhausted here, and is that a product of the lack of depth on this team? Is that a concern?
Yeah, and I was, again, I'm going to play devil's advocate because is there a lack of depth on the team? Absolutely. BYU also have been very lucky because they were very much counting on Nate Pickens being a backup point guard to help Rob Wright. He got hurt before the season even started. Dawson Baker emerges as a senior leadership guy to be able to offset and have a little bit of ball handling duties. He's hurt and done for the season. Brody Kozlowski, whom I am extremely close to the Kozlowskis, and Brody and I work extensively together on the summertime. JJ, you follow him in high school. I feel like he played a lot like I did. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Big body, tall guy, can shoot.
Knocked down through, yeah.
And Brody gets hurt. And so, it's just one of those things like AJ, a global icon and all of that. Nevertheless, AJ is still just a freshman. The load that he's been asked to carry, it is nuts. Well, yeah, but he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. You're right. But he's still 19 years old. It's, there's a reason why LeBron James is LeBron James, right? Kobe Bryant didn't have to do all of this at 19. And so, I think you're absolutely hitting the nail right on the head. That's why I've been so adamant. If you go back on the show and listen to the times you guys have me on, I'm saying someone else needs to step up. Someone else needs to step up because the Big 12 is very much a grind.
Speaking of a grind, the Cougs face off against Kansas, of course, this Saturday, another big one that's going to be on a big stage. Everyone will be able to watch it on a Saturday on ESPN. Then they go to Oklahoma State, which last year it was not a good Oklahoma State team, and they got them down there in Stillwater. Meaning Oklahoma State got them. It was just one of those weird games. It was just not on they weren't themselves. And there's no time for that, right? But then you got Houston. You go to Arizona.
It doesn't stop.
Iowa State the game after that. And so you just and everybody has little little numbers next to their names when you get to this part of the schedule, JT. There's no time to be able to every one of these games. I'm trying to figure out when you said they don't have something to hang their hat on. In these moments, though, everything could get turned around on a dime as soon as you start to get a win against Kansas, maybe at Kansas again. They've done it before. Or they host Houston and they beat Houston. Or they go down to Tucson and they maybe beat Arizona. All of these things, to be able to flip it around, then you can hang your hat really quickly in this league because the teams are all so good and they're all ranked.
Well, as you said, a quick turnaround. It reminded me of the incredible job you guys did. Alex, I know that you're covering the Olympics in Paris. Amazing job. And it just reminded me of the quick turnaround you guys would talk about for some of the athletes in the Olympics. And I think to your point, it's not like in the Mountain West, right, JJ, where we would go to Wyoming and just smack them and then go to Fort Collins, and smack Colorado State and go to Colorado Springs and just beat up on Air Force. Like, to your point, they're like, it is a juggernaut after a juggernaut. And the crazy thing is, we all thought Houston was going to be the number 1 team in the country when this all thing started. And they are like a top 10 team in the country. And then Iowa State comes out of nowhere and gets to as high as number 2. And so, mental toughness. It is such a thing that this team is going to have because, to your point, things can turn on a dime, but they can get real bad real quick as well. And, which is why, you've got to take care of business when you go to Stillwater at Oklahoma. And, how are they going to match up with Kansas? Both of you covered this. You do this for a living. Kansas, the last year and a half, too, isn't the Kansas that we all have come to know. Like, Kansas, Bill Self hasn't had good years. just having somewhat of down seasons. And they are actually in a good trajectory right now. 19 in the country. It's a top 20 matchup on Saturday. Kansas is playing at Kansas. It is, to me, it is the most pivotal game of the season that I think, depending on how it goes, we're going to look back and go, oh, geez, that's when things spiraled out of control. Similar to how BYU did at Texas Tech, where they were playing tough, and then 9 minutes to go, everything falls apart. I think this game against Kansas becomes monumental, and it can be a turning point for BYU for better or for worse.
There was something promising in the second half when we talk about depth. Kennard Davis Jr. found his stroke, 5 of 8 from 3, 17 points. I mean, that game's not even close if he doesn't step up and at least do that.
And he was game time decision, too.
Yeah, right. Is that a guy? Is that the guy you look at and say, Kennard Davis Jr. has to give them more on a consistent basis?
Well, absolutely, right? I mean, Moo Davis, as he goes by, you guys can actually go to my Twitter and say I actually called out that he was going to have a 5-for-8 game before the game started. And so if either of you want to go to Wyoming, play the lotto, I'm available this afternoon. Call me after the show.
Let's go to Evanston,
and
JT.
I prefer Idaho.
Oh, you go to Preston. I'll take him to Evanston.
Let's split the difference and let's just go up. Let's just go to towards Reno on the I-80 and we'd be okay. But what I will say is he is just a guy that before last night, the last 4 games, he was 2 for 19 from 3, 0 for 12 for in the last 3 games, and then he starts 0 for 5. I actually was texting Spencer Cox, and he was like, JT, you are so lucky he went 5 for 5 in the second half, because I was ready to give you the hardest time in the world, for your crazy prediction, but he stepped up, and he is a player that, needs to fill out the role that, Mawat Mag last year did for BYU, that 3-and-D. Right. And he just hadn't done that. And yesterday he stepped up to the, big time. I'll also say that, like I mentioned, Alexei Kostic comes in and knocks down a couple of threes that was good for his confidence. They just need somebody. Right. I mean, maybe get it done by committee, but somebody needs to do it, because 3 guys scoring, 70% or more of their points. I mean, looking at the difference, the way Arizona guarded them, they were clearly making a wall and say, AJ, thou shalt not pass the free throw line. And, Richie, thou shalt not drive to the baseline. Rob, good luck scoring over us. Now, again, right, Arizona is an exception. This is the number 1 team in the country. Yeah. One of the tallest teams in the entire college basketball scene. And so there's a reason why they made a very good argument last night to be the overall number 1 pick come, the big dance. But, Kennard Davis, glad that he had a better game. More people needs to step up, or to your point, the drag is just going to get heavy, and then it becomes an emotional toll because you lose 2 in a row. Heaven forbid they drop 1 to Oklahoma State, and then you're in a losing streak. And so a lot is at hand for the next 10 days for BYU basketball.
JT, is the season kind of grinds along here, and, BYU has been hit with a couple of injuries there too. In games like that where everybody goes, well, the big 3 have to be able to, and you said it last week, that not one of those guys can not have a great night against really, really good teams. I guess the encouraging thing is that even though they didn't have as that threesome an amazing night, they were still able to get within that 1 point with 11 seconds left. How do you maintain those 3 being able to, night in and night out, especially when that NCAA tournament hits? How do you get them to play at this insane level together all the time? Because it just seems like when they are on and they score 80 points combined, those are awesome games, but those don't happen every night.
Well, to your point, I hope, all 3 of them have invested in a hyperbaric chamber, and, they are able to just get an IV plugged into their, to their arm every night. I mean, and, as funny as that sounded, like, Jesus, this guy crazy. Tell me, this is an NBA type of load that they're carrying, where they're playing go look at the minutes. They're playing more than 35 minutes a game, like 2 or 3 times a week. You know what I'm saying? Now, yes, they're getting paid over $1 million, all three of them. And, I don't feel bad because I was playing 30-plus minutes a game, and I had a $900 scholarship check eating ramen noodles out of a cup. You know what I'm saying? But, it's just – it is such a grind. The Big 12, that's the thing too, right? They're playing in the best basketball conference in the country, and it's not even close. Before conference started, the Big 12 was 63-3. I mean, those top, the top part of the league was 63-3. Think about that. That's insane. Between BYU, Arizona, Texas Tech, Iowa State, and Houston. 63-3. And so it is, that's the thing, right? Cream rises to the top. And if BYU wants to take the next step, a couple of things have to happen. Either those guys, truly just become Superman and go to the phone booth and somehow, are able to deliver what they do, or someone needs to step up. But again, it's not like they're playing, I'm going to, just, not to spit away, but I'm glad that they're not a WCC. But this is different. We're also playing against, BYU is also playing against massive competition, and so that's also to be considered part of the equation.
Jonathan Tavernari, BYU great, and of course he does a phenomenal job breaking down this basketball team. They played Arizona. They've got it back on the road again at a historic venue this Saturday against Kansas, and we'll be looking forward to it. JT, thanks again, man, for hanging out with us as usual.
Hey, always a pleasure. Appreciate you guys, and hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, JT. Have fun on Saturday.